Hi, I'm Nancy Lee, NP. This is going to be a video about what brought me to work with the dying. And then I will add a couple little things about the use of morphine at end of life that I always like to educate people about whenever I'm discussing dying patients. So most nurses don't wake up one day and think, I think I'll go work with the dying. That's just not something somebody does. They normally have a personal experience, or they've worked in an area of medicine where they've seen a lot of prolonged suffering. Typically in ICU nurses, we see a lot of ICU nurses go into nurse practitioners as palliative care providers. Normally, end of life in a hospital setting is provided by physicians and nurse practitioners. I am a palliative care nurse practitioner, but that is not how my story started. So in 1992, my mother was admitted to the hospital that I worked in at the time with complications from end-stage pancreatic cancer. We thought it was going to be a minor complication, but it turned into a life-ending complication. So I found that after about a day of her hospitalization, it was very important that I stay as close to her bedside as possible to advocate for her pain management. The first 2 days she was in intensive care and then had to ask for her pain medication every 2 hours. After about a day of this, I asked them to please start a morphine drip. On day 2, I asked them to please start a morphine drip. Her pain was not being well managed, and she was receiving IV morphine every 2 hours. That is indicative of a patient who needs continuous infusion to help them be more comfortable. So day 3, she was moved to the floor after stabilizing, and she actually looked like she was going to improve. Me being a nurse, I knew that it was likely what we call a rally, and I will cover that in another video. In any event, she was lucid. I stayed with her the entire day into late in the evening, and she in fact still was asking for pain medication every 2 hours for severe abdominal pain that she had suffered throughout her illness. I went home for a few hours just to get some things and came back and went directly to my department. As I said, I don't know if I said this or not, but I worked in the hospital where she was admitted, and I worked with a group of anesthesiologists in their pain center. So I went directly to one of my physicians, explained to them that my mother was upstairs dying from pancreatic cancer, and they were requiring her to ask for her pain medicine and not starting a drip, which is normally what happens when someone is dying and is requiring narcotic pain medicine for management. He said, hold on just a minute, and he picked up the phone. He called her oncologist, and I heard him say, okay, and he hung up. And he said, well, apparently your father thinks your mother is going to survive and go home, and you're a registered nurse, and they're not comfortable starting a morphine drip. I said a few choice words, and then I said, I don't care what they think. I want my mother to die peacefully. And he said, let's go. So we went up to her room. In the few hours that I had left her bedside, she had become much more somnolent, sort of in and out of consciousness. When I had left, she was very lucid and had clearly had a change in her level of consciousness when we returned. My physician said to me, I have no problem starting a morphine drip at a very low rate to keep her comfortable, but just know that she will likely not be able to communicate with you anymore. And I said, I don't care. I just want my mother to die peacefully. So from there on out, I stayed at her bedside for the next 2 days. She lived an additional 2 days, and watched her go through the dying process. And unfortunately, back then, we didn't have palliative care teams in hospital settings. Palliative care was just in its infancy. Nowadays, most hospitals have a palliative care team to assist with patients who are terminally ill and or dying. We did not have that back then. In 1992, if you were dying and you were a DNR, the staff typically just pulled the door to and did not pay much attention to the patient's experience or symptoms as they progress through the dying process. There are many videos out there that talk about the dying process. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail here, but I will tell you that one of the most distressing symptoms to watch is what we call terminal congestion. You will hear it referred to as the death rattle. In 1992, back then, they just didn't know any better. And my mother, of course, was not eating or drinking because she was mostly unresponsive in what we call, some sort of coma state. And that's typical of the actively dying patient. So not eating or drinking, they were giving her IV fluids. Well, that contributes significantly to lung congestion and body edema or swelling and accumulation of fluids throughout the body, because the body is shutting down as it does during the dying process, and this fluid being given intravenously has nowhere to go. So my mother went into this terminal congestion the fourth night, and I thought I would lose my mind. I'm not going to go into details about what I witnessed, but I can tell you that no family should ever witness what I witnessed my mother go through and her struggle to breathe. After about 12 hours, it finally subsided. That said, she did die peacefully the following day. What I'd like to say about morphine, that is really, first of all, it's gotten a very bad rap. I have heard a lot of people say, oh, my brother-in-law or my cousin or my aunt, uncle, grandfather, XYZ went to that hospice, they gave them morphine until they died. That is not why they use morphine. They use morphine because it is the #1 drug of choice to help alleviate shortness of breath in the dying patient. Let me say that again. Actually, any narcotic will do it. Morphine has been studied the most. Morphine will alleviate shortness of breath and difficulty breathing in the dying patient. It is not oxygen. Oxygen does not provide comfort at end of life. It does, however, prolong dying. Many times you'll see patients with oxygen on as they're dying because a lot of studies have showed that it brings comfort to the family or actually the providers themselves. But I've been doing this for close to 24 years, and I can tell you, after helping hundreds, if not thousands of patients at end of life, oxygen prolongs suffering and dying. It should be weaned, and shortness of breath should be managed with an opiate, a narcotic such as morphine or Dilaudid or fentanyl, especially in a hospital setting. So, if you have questions about the dying process, please drop those questions in the comment section. I will be making a video a week about some common things to expect in patients who are dying and the dying process, to try to help folks navigate this time in their life, because watching somebody that you dearly love, die is a sacred, intimate, and a very painful process. And every individual deserves the right to die with dignity and peacefully. And I'm not talking about euthanasia. I do not personally believe in medically assisted dying. because we have medications that can be given responsibly in small dosages that allow the patient to be comfortable as they progress through the dying stage, and it does not hasten death. Thank you for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, and like I said, drop some questions in the comment section and I will address those. I'd like to add something I left out of the video, which was, it took me 10 years, a decade, to get over the trauma of seeing my mother die the way that she died. And I thought, I should do this work. I should do this work because I have now been on the other side of the bed. I have been the family member who so desperately wanted their loved one to die peacefully and with dignity. So 10 years after her death, I did become a hospice nurse. I have since then gone on to become a nurse practitioner, and I work in palliative medicine in a hospital setting. The other thing I'd like to add is medication-assisted dying is a personal choice. It's just not a choice I would want for myself. And if someone chooses that, there is no judgment. I think people should have the right that are terminally ill to die the way that they wanted to die. The way they want to die. Medically assisted dying is not legal in Georgia. That's the state that I live in. It is, however, legal to some degree in approximately 11 other states. And you can Google those if you have an interest in which states allow that.